Welcome to what I hope is live on LinkedIn, the Connected Leadership Podcast. The first attempt, or the second attempt to get this technology right, and I'm hoping the first successful attempt to get this technology right. So if you're joining me, according to my one of my screens, I'm live. I'm on LinkedIn, hoping it tells me I am. So if you can see me, pop something in the comments, say hello, let me know you're there. I know it might take a while for people to join us as well. So I'm going to chat just for a couple of minutes before I introduce my guest, just to give people a chance to join the call. And then we've got a really great conversation lying ahead of us. So the Connected Leadership Podcast has been running since September of last year. You can go and listen to some of the older episodes at podfollow.com /connected leadership. Rick, thank you very much. We are live, so that's great to know. We have liftoff, as Charlie Kamada, who our guests know, would say, former NASA Space Shuttle astronaut. So we're live. Rick's joined us, and hopefully some other people will be coming along as well. So let me introduce our guests, and we'll get straight into it. The idea of the podcast, the premise of it, is that professional relationships underpin everything that we do in our careers and in business. With the support of other people, we can achieve so much more. And the guests I've invited along today really rely on their networks and talk very strongly about their networks in what are very challenging roles and very important roles as well. Phil, thanks for joining us, and hello, good to see you here. And if you've got any questions for our guests as we go along, please jump in with them. I met both Jen and David on a call at 1 o'clock in the morning our time, 8 o'clock New York time. I think it was late last year. And straight away we saw that we had a lot in common in terms of how we see the world and how we see the importance of relationships. So it seemed like a natural extension of those conversations to bring them onto the Connected Leadership Podcast. So we've got Jennifer JJ Snow, who's the Chief Technology Officer for AFWERX. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I'm sure Jen will correct me if I haven't. She's nodding. That's the innovation division of the US Air Force. And we got David Schiff, who's a Department of Defense leader, innovator and federal-wide collaborator responsible for leading human-centered innovation efforts for the Department of the Navy. So I figured with resumes like that, innovation and the role of professional relationships in powerful innovation would be a key theme for today, along with just the way our professional relationships help us deal with major challenges. Neil, great to see you on the call as well. I hope you enjoyed. If you've got questions for our guests, please post them in the chat. I can clearly see the comments and who's making them, so this is working well so far. So let's welcome our two guests, JJ Snow and David Schiff. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. How was that for smooth?
Yes,
and Marianne, thank you for joining us as well.
Beautiful. Yeah,
so
thanks so much for having us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for joining me. This is going to sound very weird to people who are listening to the podcast when it's broadcast next week. So guys, I've just given some background to what you do and the role that innovation and collaboration and professional relationships play in those roles. It was clear when we met on the Mentor Project panel run by Ruth Gautian that you both know each other well. You work for different agencies of the Department of Defense in the US, but you clearly collaborate very strongly with each other as well. And I know, David, you're leading a major collaboration cross-agency effort that we'll talk about hopefully later on. So let's start by looking at innovation, because that's in both your job titles, both your roles. It's key to it. So David, how do strong networks improve innovation? And I guess the flip side is, without those relationships, where is it stopping you?
A really interesting question. Thanks, Andy. So I think of networks and relationships kind of the way you would think of bulletproof vests, which is any layer alone is brittle and any individual point is brittle. But as they start to enmesh across each other, you start getting vitality and resilience, which I think is what JJ and I have really seen across not just Navy and Air Force communities, but international allied communities and across our federal partners in the US. And I think that it seems like we're working really hard in our silos and we've got most of the answers and we've got most of the experts until we meet one of the folks in another silo and find out that they either are way further than we are, or they've tried something we haven't even considered, or they have failed and they're willing to give us their lessons, which, every time the Air Force tells me about something they've done, I'm like, I appreciate their candor and their approachability and the fact that they're willing to sometimes hand us a catalog of attempts they've made. Kessel Run literally just handed me some of their playbooks last year, and I handed them straight to Navy experts. And I love the willingness to share, especially information like that, where it's not even classified, but a lot of the time people focus on hoarding information and not sharing it.
And that's a key point for me, because you talked about silos a couple of times, and normally when we hear the term silo, we hear it in a negative sense. People hoarding information, worrying about their own targets, their own goals, and if I give this away, then we're not going to have the edge. In that competition. Jen, for you, are you finding that there's a change in culture and that there has been a silo culture in the past that's coming down, or was it never there, or is it still there but you guys are just bucking the trend?
I would say that it's still there, but I see a lot of bridgers happening, a lot of bridging relationships, a lot of amazing partnerships that are coming together, both public and private sector. And David's going to fill you in on what he's done with Naval X, because I'm a big fan about the salon that he's put together. But what I want to say is bringing all of these people into the same space is opening up this incredible diversity of perspective that we haven't had before. I am learning so much about so many different technologies, so many creative collaborations, so many different projects and new ways of thinking that I haven't been exposed to before that are happening across these different sectors and across these different agencies, that if we didn't have these bridging type of relationships, none of this would come into play. We wouldn't know. But now, because we're all starting to operate in that same space, we're able to see what's happening, and it's really opening the aperture in incredible ways. It's pretty exciting.
So you say that you hadn't seen them before. I mean, when you look back over your career, Jen, is it... Is this type of collaboration new to you across the board where you've worked before? Is it something you've seen in different environments but not in the defence space? I mean, where is it new for you?
It's new for me in that when I came out of special operations, this was the type of collaboration you would see because it's a very joint environment. And it was not unusual for us to have public-private partnerships around national security topics. When I went directly back into, big Air Force, a lot of that wasn't there. It didn't exist. And you became very specialized, which I understand. It makes sense to a certain perspective, a certain point of view that you would be, and you would be focused just on that. But what I'm seeing now, and especially in the innovation spaces that are growing and becoming more interconnected across the United States and even globally. I mean, we're teaming up with our allied partners, we're teaming up with party partners. I'm seeing these amazing discussions begin to develop about how can we share technologies that are having a bigger impact globally? How can we share technologies that will deal with transnational problems? Maybe that's human trafficking. Today, it's certainly COVID. We're all faced with the challenges there. Supply chain, cybersecurity, that's everybody's backyard. And the discussions that are beginning to happen, people are realizing, hey, we need to come together around this. We're in these shared spaces, so we should be interoperating and we should be sharing these lessons learned. Before, that wasn't happening. And to David's point, you saw a lot of people that were kind of, oh, this is mine. I'm not going to share it because this is my power and this is what makes me important. We see a lot of that going away because people realize when they open their networks, the power becomes exponential, if you will. And your networks grow stronger and they become high quality networks, which means they're more, the value is inherent. It organically grows with every new person that you add. And I'm a big fan of value-based networks where we know every person that's coming in, and we're also very aware of the contributions that they bring and how that can multiply overall the efforts and the projects that we're keen on getting moving forward.
And it's you know I'm going to be on the same page as you with value-based networks and that growth and the richness that new people bring to you. I was going to ask you about particular areas that you've had breakthrough, and it's interesting to hear that and it makes sense that COVID is a clear one. I mean, David, is it something that you found that something like COVID has just has it brought along the people who have perhaps been a bit slower to adopt this less siloed thinking?
Definitely. I think one thing Naval X has been doing, my team in particular, has been facilitating problem curation workshops. And at first, we started with just Navy organizations that could use Microsoft Teams and a digital whiteboarding tool and just kind of jump on together and try to get that one group centered on that problem from 25 households. But over the winter, we also did an international effort on digital twin technologies focused at one of our warfare centers, Carderock, Maryland, but working with folks from the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and obviously the US. And just how much we struggle with the same problems was the most interesting thing. Not how different all of our problems are, but really how similar they are, and how, even though there's some lexicon differences, which we needed to align upon, I think the overarching message was we really shouldn't be doing this alone. Like, this is, it's moving too fast, and there are too many experts on each of those different playing fields that we should be leveraging. And that was just one example, but I think that, like JJ said, and she really was at the forefront of the defense response to COVID, there are so many different things that we are better together. I think it makes very little sense for us to be siloing information.
Absolutely. Neil Giller, who's watching on LinkedIn, has just said collaboration is so much better than competition, and it's one of the things that I always talk about, that when I look inside organisations, and it doesn't have to be the biggest organisations, they don't have to be that big for the silo mentality to kick in. I see much more competition than collaboration internally, and if you're competing internally with each other, what chance have you got when you're reaching out to the market? And I guess at the macro level, at the state level where you're operating, it's exactly the same. If you can't collaborate with your colleagues within your agency, cross agency, and across allies, then what chance have you got when you're facing an enemy?
Right, so, and I wanted to add, and JJ probably has more on this topic, but when you do, Americans, for example, are very competitive by nature, and I think that can be really valuable if you do it the right way. And JJ, I want to hear from you on this, but prize challenges and hackathons and other things where you say, you know what, we're going to compete for all of us to win. That's competition that I think is healthy. The competition that's not healthy is, I'm going to poach your people and you stay away from my people, and we're going to hoard information, even though we're in the same defense department or in the same department of the Navy. So JJ, I wanted to hear from you on that too.
Yeah, definitely, David.
JJ, when you answer that, can you also explain the concept of hackathons? Because I'm sure everyone will know exactly what that is. So maybe start with that and just expand from there.
Sure. So a hackathon is a great way to bring people together. And it doesn't have to be just within an organization. In fact, in a lot of cases, we're bringing in external entities. I know when I was at AFWERX, we had participants as young as 13 years old and as old as 84. And we're seeing that same level today. And we're also going international, which is really exciting. And a hackathon is where you have a predefined problem. You know that you have an issue that you want to solve. Most recently, a big hackathon for us this past year, in August, we co-hosted with DEF CON the Air Force Hackasat Satellite Challenge, where we had it was close to 100 teams globally as of May 22nd apply and compete through a series of challenges to narrow down to the top 10. And we offered $100,000 worth of prizes for those top 10 teams to hack an Air Force satellite to show us all of the vulnerabilities. This was fantastic because not only did we save millions of dollars in the process, we also identified vulnerabilities that are shared between different platforms, and in many cases would provide international space security. And these are case studies and lessons learned that you can now share out. Another great example, besides just the hackathon, I would say is the development of different consortiums and different leagues, if you will. So the Cyber Threat Intelligence League is a consortium of public and private sector entities. These are different government agencies charged with cybersecurity. So Cybercom and NSA, the Ministry of Defense, Interpol, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Everybody got involved with this because 1,700 hackers set up a network on their own globally, 22 time zones, 70 nations, to do vulnerability screening and alert governments to the different vulnerabilities that would exist in medical facilities, research and development, government centers, schools, different financial sectors, and alert them ahead of time before a 0-day could be employed, before a hack could happen. And they set themselves up, and then they reached out to us in the government, and they said, hey, we want to work with you because we have the brain power and the skills that we know you don't have. And so when we find people doing bad things, we'll turn them over to you, and you go do your stuff, and we'll help secure the infrastructure or the areas that need the most help. These types of collaboration is saving lives, Andy. And that's why I get so excited about it, because you're saving lives, you're saving dollars, and you're making the world a better place. And I see a lot of this happening within, again, these value-based networks, building those value-based networks with people that are passionate, care, have a positive impact socially, global level, or at least a transnational level. That's where the big differences are happening, where we see these stovepipes slowly getting, worn down, and these little bridges are coming across, and more people are moving between spaces saying, hey, I learned this. Did you know? Oh, no, I didn't. But hey, we have this. Can we? And people are coming together like that. It's very, very cool to see.
And I guess when you sort of create that environment like a hackathon, and that type of almost gamification in a sense of finding results, that's a big move away from the traditional military hierarchy model.
Yes. The first time I brought hackers into a building, oh my goodness, I still remember. And this was Hondo Gertz, so Secretary Gertz, now Undersecretary of the Navy. He agreed, hey, you can bring hackers in. And this was at AFWERX, and people were hiding phones, taking their laptops out of the building. And these are all ethical hackers. These are the good guys. These are the good guys and gals that are making a difference. And we brought them in around a cyber security requirements for one of our government agencies. They actually sat in the room, academics and military and civilian cybersecurity experts in the government, and they showed them state of the art for today, and they showed them what's coming in the next 18 to 36 months. And immediately, we did this for 3 days. Immediately upon the conclusion, we had their senior leaders come up to us and say, this was the best conference ever. We didn't know this. We didn't have that depth of expertise. How can we stay in touch with these folks? And it's breaking down those barriers and those preconceived stereotypes and helping people understand the benefit of coming together with non-traditional communities and people that have perspectives that you don't have. That's the value that all of this brings. And that's where I think I see a real breakout for the government right now. And a lot of this is happening, in places like Naval X, where, David's team is pulling in variety of different people, all different backgrounds, all different agencies, and all different private sector entities to team up on cool projects like this too.
This is great. Neil's just said, why not ask a robber how to rob a house? Brilliant. And
yes.
it's the great example of it, isn't it? I talk a lot about the importance of diverse networks. You need different perspective, and this is a great example of doing it. So David,
we had. Let me share one quick story.
Yeah,
we had
sure.
the robber share. That's a perfect example. We had a cybersecurity expert that came to us, and his job is to break into facilities where he shouldn't be able to break in. And he showed us how he could get into a home by leveraging a Wi-Fi enabled microwave and popping the door mid-cycle after he had turned it on, and it fried all of the security system, allowing him to enter the house without triggering the alarms. That's been since, but these are the kinds of, exactly right. Talk to a robber to figure out how to not get robbed. Talk to somebody that understands, the bad side of cybersecurity, so you can make it good and fix it so it doesn't happen. So I just wanted to share that because that was a fun story. Everybody said, "Oh my gosh, we can't believe this."
Everyone rushed out to buy microwaves.
That's right.
But David, I'm going to ask you in a second just to tell us about what you're doing with NavalX. Jen's mentioned it a few times, and I knew I wanted to come to you on that. Before I do, in case anyone has joined us a little way through, I've been joined by Jen Snow from the US Air Force and David Schiff from the US Navy, and we're talking about the power of professional relationships in their roles. They're dealing with major issues, complex problems, and innovation, and both these guys are totally bought into the power of collaboration and building strong relationships, strong networks in order to get there. If you are beaming in live, joining us live, feel free to say hello. Hello, Bal, by the way, who said hello a little bit earlier on Facebook. And if you've got any questions or you want to comment on anything they're saying, please feel free to do so. I'm keeping an eye on that as well. So, David, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to at NavalX and how you're bringing, bringing all of those agencies together.
Sure. Quickly, I will probably be getting rid of my microwave now, and then also and then we do have an event coming up this spring that's called Hack the Machine, and that's easy to find on Google. But that one will have a maritime and data science focus, and one of my mentors, Rear Admiral Selby, who is now the Chief of Naval Research, is really behind that efforts. So. Working with a company out of Austin called Fathom 5 and working with Naval X to a degree. So, and NAVC, the organization I came from, is a big part of that as well. So we, like JJ, we have a lot of events where it's either across private sector and the federal space, or it's inside different parts of the federal space. And to your question, so about a year and a half ago, I was hanging out with another friend of ours, Katie Tobin, who worked at the Director of National Intelligence office in the U.S. ODNI is the acronym. And Katie and I were talking about, wouldn't it be great if we got together, purposefully across the intelligence community and the military, and maybe even across the federal space with other innovation groups like AFWERX and SoftWorks and Naval X and Defense Innovation Unit, and now Army Futures Command, and all these different intelligence community groups. And I was like, why don't we? And she's like, let's do it. So about a month later, I sent out an email to everyone we knew across those spaces. And I think by February, so about a year ago, we had our first Federal Innovators Salon, and it was in person. And that by the next month, we had to pivot to virtual for the remainder of the last 11 salons. But the focus has been getting not just innovation cells, but innovators in the federal government to share best practices and lessons learned, to talk to each other about their struggles and challenges, and also to build trust in that community. We do focus on sometimes soft skills, but we also focus on getting things done together and collaborative efforts. And we went from having really only about 10 or 12 organizations represented to about 40. And we went from a few dozen members to over 100 in just 6 months. So what's been really exciting is we get kind of a different group attending each time. We do, it is a closed group, but we invite more and more folks to participate. And also, JJ will tell you, some of the participants are expected to actually be showrunners. So they have to bring their creative ideas to like the next salon and say, now you're going to brief about the thing that you just said your team is doing. So it's been a really exciting moment for us, because we are seeing people from Treasury helping people from the Small Business Administration, helping people from the Marine Corps. It's just, it's just a really wonderful, diverse group of people, and everyone is very engaged to make sure that the U.S. federal government in this case is as connected and collaborative and pushing forward as fast as we can.
That's great. Jen, I'm going to come to you in a second to talk a bit about that showcasing, but I want to ask David, I want to ask you first, when you've obviously made fast progress with this and you've got great buy-in, did you get pushback at the beginning?
We didn't, because we had, I think, the time, trust, and top cover that we needed. We had the Naval X director, Captain Futcher at the time, and Mr. Gertz, who was the Secretary of the Navy for Research and Development, JJ's former boss. Just really great support at the top. And then because we were inviting people we thought would be engaged, enthusiastic, collaborative people, we very quickly got more of those kinds of people. And that is really what got the ball rolling. And it's been very fulfilling to hear someone from NATO Special Forces talking with people from the Navy and the Army, for example, and then saying, oh, you know what, the person who gave me the most insight this salon was from Department of Homeland Security. So I'm gonna talk to them. I didn't even know the Transportation Security Administration had an innovation cell until we started this. So there are creative, inspiring people across the federal government and across our allied spaces. And I think to not take advantage of their expertise and enthusiasm is wasting resources.
So there were a couple of key things there that if people in whatever space they're operating want to bring people on board, is that support from the top, which is obviously so important because it gives people trust and reassurance in the project and that it's backed. But also, you said getting the right people involved at the beginning, because that if you get the right people involved, it brings others on behind them. So I think
exactly. And just to clarify, like one thing we want to avoid the perception of is it's not like the country club mindset of like only people who can afford to come can come.
David, share your rules. Share your rules for who could attend, because I thought those were really great up front, because it set the baseline for what we were looking for. I really love this.
So we look for descriptors, really like adjectival descriptors, saying we need, and these are the Naval X kind of came up with these for ourselves, but empathetic, creative, adaptable, people who are hungry to deliver results. I mean, so that was kind of our, and people who are excited to share, not necessarily to conceal. And we all know the sensitivity level of the work we do. So some of the work in the military, for example, gets up to a classification level where you have to take that conversation to a more secure place. But the people in this community know where that line is. So, and we back each other up on that.
So let me ask you a question. It's great to have those rules, and those are really positive rules. How do you make sure, particularly if it's someone you don't know personally at that stage, how can you be sure that they fit the bill? Are you using any kind of profiling, or is it simply based on word of mouth?
Mostly based on people's recommendations. Like JJ says, I know this person at Treasury or at State Department, you should bring them in. Then I may have a short conversation with them just to make sure that they understand what this is. But other than that, it's usually people's recommendations. Like, this is someone who wants to add value is really what we're looking for.
Have you turned anyone away?
I've course corrected people when they think that it's a place to use it for their career instead of using it to help the federal government.
I'm going to use that. I like that. I course corrected people. That's the new catchphrase. We've got Marianne, who said, hi, JJ and David. Very interesting story. Damon Siegel on LinkedIn has said hi. As has my mum, who says, hello, this is great. And Lee Wolford as well has said, oh, great, hi. So we're getting some good engagement there. Was not bad for a first broadcast. Jen, I said I'd come back to you to tell us about this showcasing. And I wanted to ask you the sort of form it takes. Are you seeking purely to learn from what people share with you, or are you looking to feed back to help them improve it, or is it both?
I would say it can be both, and sometimes it can be one or the other. It depends on the topic at hand, and it depends on the customers that we have in the room. If it's a joint customer, it might touch on both. Or if we have a single customer, it might just be focused on one. I mean, a couple different examples that jump to mind, we had a hackathon challenge that we had done, and this was when I was still at SoftWorks, that was the Jump the Dog challenge. And it was our pararescue guys, our combat controllers were putting a dog on their chest for security purposes and jumping out of an airplane. These dogs would be used for EOD or, for different things in the field. And so you have to oxygenate the dog because you're jumping out at such a high altitude.
Yeah.
How do you do that so that the dog is comfortable, right? And this was a very niche, obviously, requirement. And so we knew coming into that we had a specific customer that would be using this, and it very limited. And so we opened it up to the public, and what came back was, a lot of empathy for the animals, a lot of concern for, making sure they're safe and well treated. And we had a wonderful teenager that had actually gone around and measured all the muzzles and fitted them for dogs, just to make sure that she understood, that she's like, well, the muzzles can be different lengths and sizes, and how do you, and so they were thinking of a mask, but what actually resulted, I think was even better than that. It's a bag, but it's a square bag that has transparent top to it, and you just set the dog inside, and it's got oxygen running, and the dog can look out and see his partner up there or her partner up there. And then when it's time, there are gloves, and you reach in, you put the oxygen mask on the dog, and you lift the dog out, the dog into the harness, and you jump out of the back of the airplane and with your parachute, and down you go. It worked out beautifully. But that's an example of something that's very niche and very specialized, right? We had another challenge that was for improvised explosive devices. And this was dealing with the resettlement in Iraq, where a lot of homes had been built, but the insurgents were actually putting explosives in the walls. So we didn't have enough dogs and robots to clear them. We had families that were afraid to move into the houses. And this was a problem across multiple theaters. This was a tactic that was being used in a lot of places. And so it was a big concern. And they were using passive infrared devices, the garage door opener. They sense light, heat, motion. And we were trying to figure out, what's a quick, affordable way to do this that we could move fast on that would help solve the problem today. We had this young man in the back of the room, and we're all brainstorming, and he quietly says, Bubbles. I'm going, okay, is that his nickname, or is that, what is that? And he goes, no, we can do this with bubbles. And he was right. What we did was we took a party bubble machine, and we tested it out with the device, and it would fill up an entire room with hot subsea floating bubbles that are moving all over the place, and it would set off the IR detector every single time. What you do is you put this on top of a cheap remote control car, and the Iraqi security forces could then drive it in, let the bubbles fill up the room in the house, and if nothing went off, you knew it was clear. It's an easy, smart solution, and it's really economical, and it's something that could then be shared internationally for people that are dealing with this particular problem. And so you can see that's one that's a bit broader and has like national, international reach. And then we had one that was very niche, specific to a certain community that had a problem set.
It really is such a powerful argument for opening up debate and discussion around challenges, and you're not going to find innovation by just focusing on a handful of people who are the specialists in the field. I'm very nervous saying that, because we've had the whole thing in the UK in the last few years where suddenly experts are disparaged, and I think with coronavirus we're seeing that to a degree worldwide now, and I don't believe in that, but I do believe in bringing in other thinking and different perspectives to add to the discussion. The experts can then take that and verify it and validate it and make sure it works, but let's get the different thoughts in there as well. We're getting more comments. Alan Walker has said lots to think about, so thanks Alan, and Lee has said it's fascinating, and I thoroughly agree with her. I think there's some great stuff coming out, which I knew there would be. I'm going to get slightly political, if I may. I try not to get too political on the podcast, but both our countries have been through quite a tumultuous 5 years. And have seen sharp divisions, and I guess there are a couple of questions here. So the first is, there have been very strong divisions in the US recently and very clear ones. And as much as you can share, David, it would be great to know, how that's impacted the exchange of ideas and the relationships across different agencies. And also perhaps, Jen, you could then come in and just from a more parochial perspective for me, when we're looking at Brexit here, a lot of the talk has been about the impact of losing various international agreements. So how reliant are you on international agreements, such as those with the EU and so forth, in terms of the type of sharing you've talked about, and has Brexit had an impact on that? So David, just first of all, in the US, how's that division, the political divisions right through the heart of the country, impacted the relationships between different agencies?
Regarding the agencies themselves, I feel like we at the working level mostly have done fine. We continue to focus on mission, which is always about international security, democracy, freedom, etc., and things that we all believe in, even beyond all the division. That has been a nice place to focus for us, as the country has been, and the world seems to be pretty divided on some things that we used to, I think, mostly agree on. Things like vaccines and science and what a fact is seems to be sadly up for debate. And back to what you said, Andy, like a lack of faith and trust in our experts, who I think have earned the credibility to be called that. So do people have biases? Yes, I do. I do think they do. But the division has been troubling to me, but I'm confident that with more patient conversations within and across communities, we can get back to calm, fact-based discussion, leading to more alignment about the real challenges that are facing our respective nations and the world. One thing, when you were talking about experts, that made me think about what we do at Naval X is we bring a lot of different folks to the table about sometimes a technical challenge, but sometimes an alignment or culture issue. And the thing we encourage people to do that could be done across the states and the country and internationally is say, okay, so you think your problem is based in X technology, which we can figure out, and Y cultural barrier with this other organization. We can bring the experts on the technology without any question. That's not really that hard. The why part, the how do I deal with this bureaucrat, even though I'm talking to a bureaucrat in most cases, right? Or how do I deal with this other organization that I don't trust or that's, burned us in the past? The first thing we recommend is bringing them to that next meeting. Instead of slandering them or talking about them, why don't we bring that organization in? And it should be someone in that organization who has answers, right? Not just an expert, if you will. But it's, and that could be at a low level or a high level. But instead of talking about people, we should talk with them. And the other key to that, though, is not just bringing two people into a boxing ring, but bringing in a facilitator the way you would bring in a therapist, right? So I don't believe what we're doing is qualified as therapy, but I think what we are doing is providing that objective third party, kind of the umpire, if you will, and saying, not only do we have to get through this meeting, so let's not linger on arguments too long, but also let's make sure multiple voices are heard, and let's make sure we're actually listening.
So hearing people out, mediation, and the focusing on the overall goal. I mean, Jen, I noticed that on your LinkedIn profile, and I absolutely love this. You say, I'm just looking for it in my notes. You've got this wonderful quote where you said, you don't care about who gets the credit as long as the end result is a win for your nation. So I think that very much goes to that. Let's put egos and political views to one side and just focus on the end. And when you're talking about collaboration, that has to be key, doesn't it? It's not the individual win that counts. It's the reaching the overall objective with the best results possible. So Jen, the international agreements and the impact of something like Brexit, how does that play out on the day-to-day work, international collaboration?
It hasn't really impacted the collaboration that I've been doing very much. I'm still talking with a lot of people. Obviously, politics does get raised a bit more in the daily conversations and concerns and questions do come up. But as far as collaboration, because it's an information exchange, and because in many cases we're sharing knowledge of technologies and different solutions, there's no barrier to that. So that's continued to flow throughout. And in fact, I would argue because of COVID, our reach has expanded even greater. I mean, I started out with a network before COVID that was probably about 10,000, and I'm well over 14 now. And these people are around the world. I'm talking to people in Australia. I'm talking to people in Italy, in Germany, in France, across the UK, Canada, across Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Singapore, in Japan. And so these are all innovators that have different solutions that they're trying to bring together in meaningful ways. None of that stopped. In fact, I think because we've been forced online, it's actually created a much cleaner environment for this type of coordination, and we're moving much faster in a number of areas. And I think this gets back to the experts. You see so many incredible scientific breakthroughs happening right now, and it's because there's space for people to do this, and they're not distracted. They're able to focus, whether that's in nature or that's physics or solar energy. And you're seeing some really interesting tipping points coming up in some of these different tech sectors right now too. And I'm getting excited for this because when those tipping points hit, green energy or electric vehicles or telehealth, the access for everybody globally is so much greater. And I see this starting to happen in key nations. When I see that, I get excited because I know it's going to start to spread. And that's all of that is to say that in spite of the pandemic, things have actually been getting better as far as networking and problem solving, trying to come together to make a positive difference. So yeah, despite politics, despite everything else, everybody has learned through this, hey, the real value is we're all neighbors at the end of the day. So how can we come together and make that difference? And that's been a big positive takeaway for me.
That's brilliant. That's great to hear. We're coming towards the end of the main podcast. If you're watching on the LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube broadcast, don't run away because there's more to come after we say goodbye from the main podcast. I do have a question that I want to ask David before we close, but before we do that, Jen, I have to ask you, how do you manage a network of 14,000 people?
That's a good question. So I've got a number of them on LinkedIn, but I seem to have a memory for this. And the best way I can explain it is it's like being in the Library of Congress. And so as we're talking, different topics will come up or different people. I affiliate it with a book or a specific topic area. So it's almost as if you ask me, okay, who do you know that's doing X, Y, and Z in space or X, Y, and Z in additive manufacturing? Those books come off the shelves for me and I automatically start to make the connections. Or if a company comes in, they say, hey, we have this solution, I automatically start to think, okay, who in government has this shared problem area that I can begin connecting them to? So my brain has just always done really well with connecting people and ideas and linking them together. But I think for those that are seeking to build, I think LinkedIn is a great tool, but there are a lot of other tools that you can use to digitally connect with people in meaningful ways. I know they have a lot of digital lunches where you can actually sync up with people topics of interest. That's a lot of fun. There are a lot of different conferences where you can begin to network with people because they've got social media groups that are developing around those topic areas of interest. And so that helps me to kind of maintain specific grouping, like pods of networks that I can tap into as I have questions or I need to ask for expert assistance.
I think that I call it having a hook to hang people on. Your library metaphor is key. I remember a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, I was talking to Carol Stone. Carol Stone's very well known in London as the former BBC Radio 4 producer for Any Questions and Women's Hour, very well known programmes, and was known as the Queen of Networking. She knew everyone who was everyone. And if you got an invite to Carol Stone's Christmas party or one of her salons in her home, that was the golden ticket. And I asked her once how many people were in her network, and I think she said 20,000. And I asked her a similar question. I said, how many of those do you know, really know? She said, oh no, I can't know 20,000. Only about 10,000 of them, which I thought was a wonderful answer to the question. So just to finish off on the main podcast, David, we've talked a lot about interagency collaboration. We touched very early on private-public partnerships and conversations. How much of your collaboration and relationship building extends into the private sector, and how important is that, and how does it differ from cross-agency collaboration?
That's another great question, Andy. Jen probably has even more experience in this because her work at AFWERX predates NavalX's existence, and my time at Defense Innovation Unit too. But I will say, from our perspective, one thing we noticed was there were these ecosystems of very high activity, high engagement in the Navy and Marine Corps, especially around warfare centers and universities. And if there happened to be an industry and state and local government ecosystem built around the military and university sector, so Orlando, Florida was a great example. We have this organization there called NOC-TSD. It's a Naval Air Warfare Center. And those folks were already working routinely with industry, doing reverse industry days, where instead of saying this is our requirement from the stage, it was more of a discussion of, here are our problems, what do you think, right? Asking industry and academic reps, and at first the government attendees were reluctant to speak in these forums, but over about 6 months, the lady who was helping run those, Diana Teal, who's our representative there, she helped build trust in that ecosystem. The fact that they were all co-located within a few miles helped a lot. You can't always have that. It's not always that easy. But again, that might be something changing with COVID. But anyway, long story shorter is that we decided each of these ecosystems, when it gets to a certain level of fidelity between those different groups, we're going to support them and call it a tech bridge. So NavalX now has 15, including one in London, that was just announced, I think, a few months ago. And these mostly do center around existing Navy equities. But usually the key is there has to be some interest from local and state and city governments. There has to be interest from a university ecosystem of some sort. And then there has to be some kind of burgeoning industry representation, not just a doorstep for a massive Fortune 500 company, but people who are tinkering in garages as well. People who have mid-sized businesses that may not actually have any military application yet, right? So those are the things that we're really looking for. And Orlando, Crane, Indiana, and Newport, Rhode Island, I think inspired us to say, this is what the future should look like in defense collaboration and these ecosystems. If we build them out, it'll be easier for industry to know what our problems are and to really work together. And we do propose most cases that industry look at a dual use opportunity, meaning a commercial and a military application. So JJ, I'm sure I missed something. What do you think on this one?
I was just going to add on, I'm super excited about the tech bridges. I'm a big fan of this model. Diane is great. I recently met her. I'm super impressed with what they're doing in Orlando. As a Naval Postgraduate School alumni, I'm really excited about the Central Coast Tech Bridge. And the piece that got me super excited there is we're joint. So Air Force is involved, and they just brought in the Academic Venture Accelerator. This is super cool because they now have 38 of the top 40 Ivy League schools across the United States and all of their tech transfer offices involved in generating technological solutions to get into government to help solve the biggest and the toughest challenges. And the cool part of this, and this is why I'm such a big fan, again, anytime I see Hondo Gertz moving into a space and setting stuff up, he's got this bright mind. And this is another one of his bright ideas. This concept is so key to accelerating innovation because now students at the Naval Postgraduate School can tackle a topic that matters to their unit use that for their capstone or thesis exercise, get funding from the Air Force through the STTR program, team up with one of these universities or a company, solve the problem for their paper, and then when they transition, take it with them back into the field to their next command. So you're transitioning the valley of death that prior to this has stymied a lot of those technologies from getting into the hands of the end users. And so I love this because the students are now going in and they're bringing the problems that they've seen with them and solving it. They get 2 years to solve it, and they're walking out with a master's degree or 3 years with a PhD. And again, it's just brilliant. You're driving innovation and you're teaching mid to senior level leaders about how to operate in technology influenced environments. What could be better? So yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of what they've done.
And let me add the last part of this, which is having college students with no military background engage in these hacking for defense things. Rich Carlin from ONR, Office of Naval Research, has really inspired that. Working with Steve Blank and their mission model Canvas, we have this thing called the Navy Innovation Process Adoption, and I know the Air Force is doing similar things in their Spark cells. The bottom line of all of these things is you're getting different communities engaged together on something exciting. And for the military, it's like, maybe we'll get some new talent coming out of universities. Maybe we'll retain some of our own talents. When you have industry folks working with military folks, we learn from each other. When defense acquisition folks see what industry is using for a digital tool, maybe we can be inspired to actually get that thing secured and approved for our use. So there are so many great butterfly effects from each of these instances that it really is a win-win.
Fantastic. As I was saying before, if you're catching up on the live broadcast, don't run away because there's more to come. If you're listening on the podcast, come back on Thursday. We're going to have an additional 15 minutes with JJ and David looking at the role of professional relationships more for their personal careers, whereas in this episode we've been talking about their roles and the impact on their roles. But I hope you agree with me, that's been a really insightful tour of what's happening in the defence world globally as well as in the US, and not just some really interesting stories, but some takeaways that can be of value to people, whatever you're doing and whatever your role. So for the moment, just for a few seconds, Jen and David, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. This is
okay, so I hope you're all still tuned in. We are going to carry on and we're going to record the Thursday podcast, which I just trailed, which is the 15-minute one. And I have 3 extra questions for JJ and David. Richard, thanks for saying hi. He said good collaboration. And I'm not sure if he's talking about us talking together or what you're sharing, but hopefully both apply. If any of you guys have got questions that you'd like me to pose to Jen and David, if they're not rushing off and we've got time, I'll be happy to pose those briefly for 5 minutes or so after we do the second podcast recording and give you a chance to some exclusive access and exclusive content for you. But let's go straight on with the Thursday episode. This will be going out next Thursday, I believe. So we start off always by looking at the role of professional relationships in your career, and more specifically, which relationships have really stood out for you and made a difference for you in your career. So Jen, would you like to kick us off? Who's really stood out for you in the way they've supported you in your career and the impact that they've had for you?
So right off the bat, when I look back to being a shiny new lieutenant at my first assignment, I had a couple of people that really stood out to me. And again, I was, new and at Air Force Special Operations Command, and one of the few women that happened to be there with the Special Tactics teams. And so Colonel Jim Mason and Colonel Rob Thompson, just amazing, both of them. As far as mentorship and leadership examples, I remember Colonel Mason in particular. I was super nervous because I had to get up and brief all of the leading generals for headquarters and the crisis action group, and then go around every morning. I was in by 4:30 putting together a book and taking it around, and I wanted it to be just perfect. And he kept telling me, relax, it's going to be great. It's going to be. And so my first crisis action team briefing, he sent me up to the door, and they have this it's a doorbell with a camera on it. And it's the first time I've seen one of those. And so he sent, one of our master sergeants, Ronnie Cotton Long, and told me, just relax, and Ronnie was kind of a goofball and I liked him, good guy. He shows up and he's there and he goes, hey, Colonel says, make sure, put your eye up on the lens. No, you don't do that, but I didn't know it. So I lean in, you're supposed to show your badge. And I got my eyeball there and I'm pushing the button. The guy inside's going, remove your eye from the camera. We need to see your badge. Completely diffused the situation. I walked in, I was so much more relaxed, and it set me up for success because I was able to be in the room and be confident in who I was and have fun with it. And that set the pathway for, I think, the rest of my career. With Colonel Thompson, anything that I wanted to try or do, he let me do. It was no different than what the guys were doing. And I felt very included. I felt like I was part of a family. He sat down and ran through everything from his leadership lessons learned to his financials to how to, take care of your family, work-life balance, and spent 2 hours with me when I first got to the unit. And he was traveling and our director of operations was traveling. So a lieutenant colonel and a major, they put me in charge of the unit while they were gone. So I would have that experience. Again, a lot of trust and a lot of opportunities to really learn. And so that was super big for me there. And then I would say, the next person that really impacted me was private sector, Toby Redshaw with Verizon. I met Toby through a project with Department of Energy, and he has been a longtime friend and mentor. And alongside of him, James Giordano, Dr. Giordano with Georgetown, neuroethics lead for their program. We had great times working on a lot of different projects. And what they taught me is you're never going to know everything. So don't be afraid to step up. And the best place to be is you're the dumbest person in the room because you're learning from all of the other smart people around you. That gave me the confidence I needed to step into any room and be able to talk and be unafraid of saying, hey, I don't know about that. Can you tell me? I'd like to learn more. Or can we sit, pull up a chair over here and mentor me on what you're working on? Because this is really cool. Or I don't understand. And so being comfortable asking questions and being comfortable saying, hey, as a leader, I don't know. Can you tell me more? I think that opens so many important discussions. And then I'd say that the final one, of course, was working for Hondo when I got down to AFWERX. Absolutely exceptional leader, somebody that really puts people first and lives by his ethics, morals, and values. And all of these individuals that I've described, they all have specific ethics, morals, and values. And they really taught me, put those first. See people as people, value people because the people are what make the mission. And in every case, they challenged me and helped me to grow as a person, as a leader, as a professional. So I would say those are the main people. There are so many, and I'm sure I'm leaving several out right now. There are a lot that come to mind, but I know we're short on time. But those are the primary ones that really had a big impact on my career and who I became personally and professionally.
I think that there are a lot of leadership traits in there that you shared, and it seems unfair to pick out on one because they're all so important. But I think one that we don't talk about enough is the use of humour to relax people. And to engage people, and as I say, it feels bad to not pick up on trust or just the right word at the right time or installing that confidence. But that use of humour, I think, is something that we are going to be talking about in a future podcast. And I think it's such an important one to help people just put those fears to one side or the nerves to one side, whatever it might be, and just engage on a human level. So thanks for that, Jen. David, how about for you?
I think that to Jen's point, a lot of these folks empowered me in my past and inspired me to try things that I probably wouldn't have tried. When we start in the Navy, it's an ensign and not a lieutenant, right? I ended as a lieutenant, so two ranks later, and more the British style there. But I remember both my department head, Lee Ackert, on my aircraft carrier, and his deputy, Kevin McGeera, just handing me a division early on in my time, it was, I think, 75 or 80 sailors, and I was right out of college. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this level of responsibility. And a lot of those sailors were older than I was. I was 23, and having their trust, and that was really pretty intense, because they're going through a lot in their own personal lives, not just the professional life on an aircraft carrier. So learning how to listen to those sailors and help them in any way I could, or hand them to someone who maybe would be a better supporter in certain cases. That was important for me as far as people goes. And then my submarine time taught me kind of the trust the Navy puts in you as a technical person kind of early in your career. And being the diving officer on a submarine, where you're essentially controlling the depth and ballast of that ship for 6 hours at a time. The first few times I did that on my own, I was pretty sure they'd made a huge mistake. I was like, I cannot believe they're putting me in charge of this boat. And I got better and better until I was training other people on it, and within a year. And it's amazing that the military can hand you those kind of opportunities and say, I don't care who you are, where you came from. We're going to give you the training, then we're going to trust you to start actually doing this. And that's what Jen and I do in our day jobs now, is make sure that people don't just talk about what would be nice to do, but why don't we just start doing it? And that culture of experimentation is usually inspired by good leaders. I have to say Hondo as well, because he built Naval X kind of out of the blue, a different mindset from even AFWERX, which he had also helped build. Mr. Bill Bray, who was his deputy for research and development, who called me one day and said, David, I know you did a rotation with Defense Innovation Unit. Would you like to run the Navy's new innovation unit? And I was just like, why is he asking me to do this? I mean, I'm sure there are more qualified people. And I did ask him that. And he said, you're a connector, and that's what we really need here. And that was a very powerful moment for me, that something I had that wasn't even on my resume, that doesn't count for anything in the military's list of technical attributes, was something he saw in me that was valuable anyway. And I think we need to see that our colleagues and people who work for us, and even our bosses, we need to help them realize, like, hey, that thing you do, no one says thank you for that, or no one puts that on your resume, but that is one of the most important things in our team. And I think we don't point it out enough when we have someone who, a lot of people in their families say that a certain member of the family is the glue. And the family, what is that? Well, it's someone who cares a lot and listens and focuses on everyone to some degree. And I think that is really where the leaders in my life have done great. I have to throw out a few other names: Will McCarthy, Chris Wood, Emily Harmon, Gloria Valdez, Erica Plath, and Bill Leonards. Just from a professional standpoint, it gave me a lot of confidence to do what I do now and to do it well. And I remember Gloria Valdez was the head of shipbuilding, basically in contract management and policy at the Navy before she retired. And one of the things she said that I thought was so useful was, we were sitting in a room with her at the beginning of a fellowship program, and we were kind of in shock to be in the room with this woman, a very prestigious person in the Navy. And she said, it's great that you guys get to sit here and talk with me and Allison Stiller, these two senior executives. But she said, ultimately, though, we're going to be gone soon enough, and you guys really will have to rely on the people sitting next to you, the people in your peer group, and other people who are still going to be around. So don't forget, when you're looking for mentorship, that you should be looking across and not just up. And then don't forget to mentor others. And that is part of the reason I joined the Mentor Project, thanks to JJ and her recommendation, is because I think it's so important that you not only get the mentorship and guidance you need, but also that you provide the support you need to others.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that one of the things that's come through from both of your answers very strongly is the importance of people placing trust in you. For both of you guys, the impact on you has been people who have said, no, we trust you to do it, and have given you the confidence to go ahead and do it. So I think that that's a really important takeaway for people if they're responsible for other people or just working alongside them. Let go a little bit and give people their wings, so to speak. Okay, I'm aware of the time on the podcast and my promise, so a quick answer from each of you to this one, because I do think there's going to be something fascinating here. So when has it gone wrong? Where have relationships gone wrong for you, and what have you taken away from it? David, do you want to kick off with this one?
Yeah, I pride myself in not having a ton of burnt bridges behind me. I try not to leave them that way, but when they have gone wrong at times, especially in the work environment, sometimes it's my lofty expectations of others, which sometimes I need to temper, right? Another bad communication that can be on either person's part, assumptions, which we all know what that stands for, right? And then unexplored sensitivities that have messed up a few relationships. And I do my best to repair those when I can. Some people also decide quickly, they just look at you and they decide they don't like you or they don't like the way you do business. And my advice to anyone in that situation is just keep being yourself and keep moving.
Yeah. If they don't know you well enough to make the judgment, then the problem isn't with you. And it's important to hold on to that. Jen, how about for you?
For me, I think any of the times that's happened, it's either been a miscommunication or sometimes a disagreement or friction point between values and ethics. But more often than not, it's been a miscommunication. And I can give one example. We were actually asked to do a security check for a secure facility just to make sure that everything had been locked down. And we didn't include the security lead, the guy that was responsible for the site. We did this. So our team went in, right, because we were supposed to go in and surprise, but we should have really brought him in. And we found that there were specific vulnerabilities. And then we went in and briefed, and he was surprised by it, which is never a good place to be. And it was a good learning lesson for me because working in that environment was very difficult afterwards. Rather than if I had known enough to bring him in early on and include him in the discussion, we could have presented it together and it would have been less detrimental to him. He wouldn't have been ashamed or embarrassed about it. And it would have given him an opportunity to be prepared when we went into that meeting saying, hey, we identified this together and we're working to fix it together. So that was a really good lesson learned on, being thoughtful about bad news in particular and making sure the right people are included up front. So it makes them more collaborative and more positive about the overall experience. So mainly miscommunications have been the biggest challenge. And when there's a value or an ethics conflict, a lot of times I'll sit down with the person because I really value positive communications and I want to understand where they're coming from. What's their point of view? Why do they feel like this? And can we have a critical discussion about it? And usually when those discussions have happened, they ended very positively because we're able to understand each other and come together and disagree, on those things that we disagree upon, but then realize that, hey, we still have a lot of strengths that we can come together and work together on. We don't have to agree on everything.
Which goes back to the approach that David was sharing earlier in our Monday podcast about the way you approach these meetings where there are conflicts of ideas, with the mediation and the eye on the objective rather than the ego getting in the way. Absolutely.
And let me just say, JJ, I think a lot of people talk about this stuff, but I have seen her for 2 years walk the walk every single week since I've met her, just as far as sharing information, as far as sharing networks, as far as saying, I don't know if this is going to work, but can we try to get these two things together? She is definitely, I don't know if spirit animal is a politically correct thing to say, but definitely someone I look up to and aspire to be more like, because if she has 14,000 connections, I'm still trailing by quite a few. And I definitely am inspired by the way JJ does business. And Chris Wood, when he was running Naval X, told me the last thing he said is, he said, follow JJ. He said, whatever she's doing, he's like, I see you doing well if you follow her lead. So I don't know if she knows that, but that's.
I didn't. Thank you. That means a lot. And To put David on the spot briefly, I've learned so much from his ability to connect with different people across different communities. And even those people that are sometimes a bit reluctant in the room, he reaches out to everybody. He makes everybody feel included, and he always has the right words. I've learned a lot from your leadership style, how you engage with people. So it's mutual. I really, really appreciate the teamwork and collaboration that we've been doing.
And can I just pick up on that for people watching and listening? And for those of you watching, you'll have seen Jen's face as David shared that, and vice versa. Don't underestimate the power of appreciation and gratitude and the impact it has on people. And I think we forget that all the time. I felt at times like I've been broadcasting into a void with the podcast, because there has been feedback, but it's been limited. In the last couple of weeks, I've suddenly had people say, I'm really enjoying the podcast, and it's made such a difference in motivating me to keep going. So I've known we've had amazing guests and really great discussions, but when you're broadcasting into that void, it's hard to keep motivating yourself. So I really appreciate the feedback that I've been getting, and for everyone listening or watching, who can you go away and tell you're making an impact right now, because it makes such a difference. And that's not me fishing, by the way. Go and tell someone else, but it does make a difference.
Well,
I've had my fill.
Keep going, Andy. You're doing great.
Thank you. Yes. Right, last question, because you've been very generous with your time, and I really appreciate it. Speaking of appreciation, always finish by asking about books and podcasts, talks that you enjoy that have really had an impact on you. So can we have some top
David
tips?
and I were talking, right? We were talking earlier, and I think it's Just Ask by Andy Lapata, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I just lost you there, probably at the key moment.
She said just ask by Andy Lapata.
What a time for the sound to drop.
Andy, I think it's right behind you.
It is right behind me.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's yes, I usually have airplane mode on when I do this, and I left it off so I could see we were broadcasting okay, and someone tried to phone me and it came through on my computer, and it came through just as you said that, so it probably sounds like I was trying to get you to repeat it. So other than the plug for Just Ask, the timing could not have been more comedic there. Other than an unpaid for and unrequested plug for Just Ask, which I appreciate, what stood out for you?
Oh goodness, there are so many good books. So I'll tell you, I brought a bunch up here because I saw David quickly pulling his books together earlier. I am a huge Malcolm Gladwell fan.
Yeah,
anything Gladwell does, I got to get the camera right. Absolutely fantastic. I think I own every single one of his books because I love the difference in perspective that he brings.
Yeah,
oh my God. You see things so much differently.
And that was What the Dog Saw by Malcolm Gladwell, which I haven't come across before. I haven't come across that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then another one that I really enjoyed, a friend of mine, Barhava, his book, there we go, Eat Left-Handed. This one has some fun leadership lessons learned, some great reads in the back. I would say check this out. That's great. It really is fantastic if you're into leadership books, which I'm into a lot of leadership and personal development, not just for myself, but also if you're involved in technology, the one thing that's consistent across the board is people.
Yeah.
People are creators, they're the drivers, the inspiration for the users of, and if you don't understand the people, then you'll never fully understand the extent to which the technology can actually impact a space. I would also say Connected by Christakis and Fowler. This book is fantastic, and especially right now, because it talks a lot about social media and the challenges and how that are even 3 or 4 layers away from us can still influence and exert certain effects on us. It's so important to understand this in this day and age. And then any authors that are thinking differently, a big fan of Rich Sheridan's work, Chief Joy Officer, Joy Incorporated. These are great ways to look at how people are doing things differently in the industry and why you should break with tradition, break those paradigms and try new things. And then finally, I would say anything on positive attitude, joyful living. I cannot pronounce this gentleman's last name, but I love the book.
Let's hold it up. I'll see if I can do it. You come the
me-
other way. So
Can you
it's
see
Flow. Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. We'll put it in the show notes.
But it talks about, flow for creativity.
Yeah.
So I a lot around meditation and positive thought, and attitude is everything. And so these are the kinds of reads that I bring in. And it also helps when you're thinking creatively about different technologies and bringing those types of mindsets in. So I do a lot in philosophy and a lot with Buddhism. Thich Nhat Hanh is another favorite read for me. He's got some great insights there. So, and then I would also say I jotted two more. Einstein's Dreams by Lightman. Fantastic. It sounds boring. It's not. It's a lot of fun, and it's an interesting read. Really get your creative thoughts going. And then Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Yeah, that's come up before.
Yeah, fantastic read.
Can I just
those
ask?
would be mine.
Can I just ask you, Jen? We've had a couple of requests. I think a couple of the books went by a bit quickly in terms of titles.
Oh, yes.
So can we just run through them very quickly, just by title and author?
Yes,
and
yes.
I'll let you off the one with Flow.
Very good. Very good. So What the Dog Saw, and Other
Malcolm
Adventures
Gladwell.
by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
And he's got Outliers and Tipping Point, really great books.
Definitely.
Always Eat Left-Handed, 15 Surprising Secrets for Killing It at Work and in Real Life by Rohit Bhargava.
Great.
And then we've got Joy Incorporated by Richard Sheridan.
Excellent.
Connected by Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler. The gentleman whose name I can't pronounce, his book is called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And it's Mihaly, and the last name, Csikszentmihalyi, which is why I'm having a very hard time pronouncing it. But I've got to tell you, if you're looking for books on flow state, this is a fantastic read. Then Einstein's Dreams by Lightman and Mindset by Dweck. Those are the main ones. Oh, let me add one more.
One more quickly. Yep.
One more. Jane McGonigal, Reality is Broken. She talks about incentivization and gaming, how gaming can actually help us translate the human experience better. And I think that's really pertinent today, especially as we're more involved in the digital space and online.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jen. And David, you're going to fill up everyone's Amazon trolley, or other booksellers are available.
I'll try not to. So just a few that have really inspired me. And JJ has just added to my list by 8 of these. I'm
writing yours down too. So.
Okay. Well, she's probably read all these, but Range by David Epstein, Josh Smith and Dave Nobles from the Tang at Johns Hopkins got me into that one. And it's about generalists in a world of specialists, and just amazing stories. I love that one. Just, not underestimating the use of breadth, not just depth, So, and then Creative Confidence by the Kelly brothers, who founded IDEO and I think the Stanford Design School. When I was at Defense Innovation Unit, I had that one on CD. I was driving around Silicon Valley with that on, and that was about as good as it gets. Just when you're in a big organization, it feels like you can't make any difference, and that's not true. And it's just kind of, how do I get started on making a difference where I am? And then eventually, that might take you somewhere else. Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg, who also wrote The Power of Habit.
Yeah.
I love the stories in these books, like JJ was saying about the ones she mentioned. A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger, which is really, as a former journalist, I really appreciate the value of incisive, very useful questions. And if you ask good questions, you get better answers. And Andy knows this. And then Laszlo Bock's Work Rules, because I think the the way we hire and retain in the federal government needs to modernize, and that it's across the military, the federal workforce. Not saying we need to wholesale change out everyone we have, but saying we have to do better at treating people differently and recognizing other attributes. Like I was saying earlier, the fact that me being a connector mattered to Bill Bray would not show up anywhere in the system we have. So it was up to him to make that call. And then my wife loves a Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink, and I think that one's a classic at this point. But anyway, that's kind of where. And then I couldn't get away without saying Jason Knudsen made me read the Phoenix Project, and I didn't want to read it. But if you're trying to understand the way system. I may be frozen now.
Yeah, I think you've come back. We lost you very briefly, so I got you on. If you're trying to understand the way your IT system. We cut you off
the
there.
Phoenix Project was the last one, and I actually it's 3 authors, and I always forget their names. But that one is a very interesting read if you want to understand. One, it's not just your IT shop's fault when your organization's having trouble. It's kind of really more about the use of Agile and Scrum, and it's about collaboration and communication.
Great. Jen, David, thank you so much. I promised 15 minutes. I think we've nearly doubled that. But I think there were some great takeaways there, so I hope people will forgive me on this one. And just typically right at the end, we lost connection after that. So thank you very much for joining me. And thank you everyone who's joined us on this first live stream, particularly all the way through. And I know a couple of you have definitely been there all the way through, and for your comments all the way through as well. Really appreciate it. So this will be out Monday next week and Thursday next week, I believe, on the Connected Leadership podcast. If you want to check some of the previous episodes, we've got a couple of fascinating interviews this week with Dr. Martin, or Professor Martin Gargiulio from INSEAD Business School in Singapore on social capital. That came out on Monday, and my second chat comes out with him tomorrow. Please do check those out as well. Well, this seemed to work pretty much. So tomorrow,
Thank you.
tomorrow I'm interviewing Dr. Ivan Meisner, founder of BNI, for about half an hour. Not a Connected Leadership podcast, just as a chat about his contributions to Just Ask, that book that Jen and David love so much. And then on Friday, we've got another Connected Leadership podcast broadcast with Rebecca Seal, Guardian or an Observer food writer, a Sunday brunch presenter, who's just written a book called Solo that's all about how to work alone without losing your mind. So really good book. I'm reading it at the moment, and we'll be chatting more about that and a little bit about food. So join us for those. 3:30 tomorrow, 4 o'clock on Friday. That's the Greenwich Mean Time, British time. We'll see you then. Jen, David, thank you so much for joining me and for persevering through the tech on this.
Thanks for having us. This was so much fun.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
And thanks, JJ, and everyone for watching.
Yeah, thanks, David. Always good to see you.